The point of this webinar will be to sort of just walk you through what we did and how we went about it. I'm not going to get extremely technical. I will talk a little bit about but I'm not going to be too technical. But I do encourage you that if you're serious about pursuing this, you reach out to me after this and we can talk more nuts and bolts if that's something you want to do. So at Legal Services of Greater Miami, we underwent the process of launching online intake for our program, so that's what I'm going to talk about. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about our statewide pilot. So why did we pursue online intake? Well, online intake, especially the way we did it, which is through the Legal Server online intake module, and since we are an online Legal Server program, the online intake module through Legal Server just integrated beautifully so with our own system. The module is accessible, meaning people can reach you at any time. So we have a system where people can walk into our office or call us for services, but those are limited hours and during work hours during the week. Obviously, having something that's accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for people who are working or may have a difficult time contacting you during those business hours to even find out if you handle the problem they're contacting you about can be a little difficult. So being accessible those hours of the day that our office isn't open was a big reason why we wanted to move to online intake. Online intake through the Legal Server module is responsive. So people can use their smartphones, their tablets, any device pretty much, and the online intake application will shrink down to make the menus smaller and easier to use if they're on a smartphone or a tablet than they would be on a full website. And we know that a lot of our clients, that's the way they access the internet, so that was important to us. It is integrated, so as I mentioned, it is built on the Legal Server platform, and so therefore it is integrated already into the system that we were currently using to do our regular intake. And we decided to build it trilingual because we did not want to be exclusionary. We didn't want to leave some people in our community out from having that kind of access. So what you need to consider when you're trying to move to, or considering moving to online intake. Pros, the greater accessibility, the ease with which people can be referred to your program, the ease with which they can be referred to another program through your online intake application made it something that was very attractive to us. And the fact that you're screening people out who would never qualify for your services. And by this I mean people who are contacting you about a criminal matter or a family law matter in our case because we don't handle family law, or immigration. The types of cases we do not handle, they never have to clog up our intake system and maybe either make a trip down to our office and have to just get told where they actually need to go for those services, or in some cases call our office and possibly have a short wait time on a phone queue to then be given the same information. And oftentimes when you're on the phone, you can give them a phone number to another place. You can give them much better materials if you're online, and you can link them directly to another provider. The cons, of course, are opening up the potential floodgates. You can't control who clicks on that link and starts your application. And you don't want to screen people out incorrectly. You don't want to build a system that is sending clients who are eligible away from your office. Because some of those people may call you, but you don't want to turn people off to your services. So you have to be cognizant of sort of both these things, the pros and the cons. So what you should be doing before you start even building anything online, before you sit down to actually map out what your application will look like, you need to determine what platform you're going to use. It used to be that your only option was A to J, really, and now that has grown, and there are lots of different platforms on which to build an online intake application. Something as simple as a PDF form that people complete and email to you or fax to you, or something as integrated as using a Legal Server platform that then just transfers directly into your case management system. Let everyone in your organization know that you're going to begin developing an application. I think this is important because you want to start right at the beginning with anybody who is going to be very apprehensive about this. We found that there was a little bit of apprehension from our intake staff, the fear being, are you getting rid of us? Obviously that was not the case. This was to enhance our online intake, our intake procedures, not to eliminate anything that we were doing. and it actually is very helpful to them, and I'll talk about that a little later. But you want everybody to have buy-in, and the earlier you do this, the better, because you're going to need people to help you test. You're going to need people to help you think through the ways you want to have this application work, and you need them in on the process early and not so late in the game. Establish baselines for your program. So if you are not collecting data on how many people you see, how long it takes you to see them, how many people walk in versus call in, depending on what your intake structure is, it's going to be very hard for you to feel the impact or to quantify the impact of online intake. So we have Google Sheets, because that's just, we have a Google site, so we use Google Sheets, that are used at the front windows at both our offices to log when a client arrived, what time they got here, what time they returned the form saying what kind of services they needed, when they were seen by an intake paralegal, how long that intake paralegal took to screen them, what the result was, whether it was an open case, information and referral, a follow-up appointment if they needed to come back with more information, and if they met with an attorney, what time they met with that attorney. So we have very clear data as to how long it takes someone from walking in the door to seeing an attorney and getting legal advice. And similarly, our phone system collects that information for the calls in our phone queue. How long a client was on hold, who handled the call, how long it took them once they handled that call. And then we use LegalServer to run reports on how many cases came in, how many from the vast number of intakes that we do every month or week or however we want to break that down. So having those baselines, just aside from just the LegalServer data, but having spreadsheets that can sort of quantify what time your staff is spending screening clients and what time clients are spending in your office being screened. Because obviously at the end you can compare that to the impact that online intake makes. Get comfortable with uncertainty. As a lot of us are lawyers, and we have this tendency to think, you know, everything's got an answer and it's going to be kind of clear and we should know at the beginning what we're going to be doing at the end. And what I learned through this process is that the reality is that you start off thinking something's going to happen X way and it doesn't happen that way, or it does, but the problem that you anticipated isn't actually a problem at all. It's something completely different. So it's helpful to be somewhat comfortable with the fact that things are going to change, and you're going to want someone who is able to roll with the punches and keep the project moving forward. Identify critical decision points, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but basically you really need to decide what are the things that you need to know from people and where you will be screening people out to determine that they don't qualify for your services. You can't just ask 15 questions, in my opinion, and get to the end and then say you're ineligible when you didn't need to collect all that data. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we broke that down. And staff the project adequately. You want someone who knows LegalServer now, if you're doing it on the LegalServer module. You want someone who's comfortable with technology, and you certainly want someone who's excited about doing this, because if they're not, it will be a lot harder for them to want to participate in this project and want to make it successful. So having somebody enthusiastic and who wants to move this forward, and hopefully somebody who has knowledge of your intake system. Building the application. Keep it simple. I find that if you overcomplicate things, people will give up on the application or give up on whatever process it is, in this case the application. So we try to collect as little information as possible until we know that this person is likely going to qualify. Use branch logic to guide the process. So again, you want to find points that you can route the information. Now, in LegalServer, branch logic, the way that it works is, and the way we use it, for example, is one of the first questions that we ask after we go through the disclaimers and, you know, this is not a guarantee that we'll accept your case, and that sort of landing page that you get on, is identifying what county the person lives in. If they identify a county we don't serve, we use branch logic. So if they identify Miami-Dade County, if yes, if Miami-Dade, then yes, go to the next step. If not Miami-Dade County, then go to this referral page where it tells them here's where you can go for other providers in your area, or for providers in your area. So branch logic will help guide the application step by step to where people are going to be routed out of your application or routed to the next step in your application. Collect only essential information. We don't even collect the person's name on the first 2 pages, I believe. We just go through getting information that will determine this person doesn't qualify. So, for example, if they pick Miami-Dade, they make it to the next step. And if after that step they pick criminal, they're going to get a referral page. They're not going to get routed through to give me name, address, phone number, any of that stuff. I feel that through testing, you're going to get a lot less complaints from people if you're not collecting information up front to then tell them they're ineligible. You will get to a point where you do need to collect that data, but it doesn't have to be the first thing that you collect. Test, test, and test. You're going to build this application probably on your own or with one other person, maybe from your office. You're going to be knee-deep in it. It's going to make perfect sense to you. And then somebody else is going to come look at it, and they're going to see all the gaping holes. And you're going to want to do that over and over again so that it doesn't just make sense to you. It makes sense to anybody who opens that application and looks at it. Make modifications. Even if you thought something was brilliant, if it doesn't work, you have to change it. And just be willing to sort of give up that ego and make the change and move forward in the process. And sometimes you'll think things made perfect sense and they just will not work. So you just have to be willing to go with that and make the changes. And link to other websites for dynamic information. So we try to steer away from linking to things like flyers and brochures, which are constantly updated, maybe not replaced. The information might grow stale and outdated. So if you link to the page where information is on, let's say, FloridaLaw.net or whatever, there you're going to get information that might be more updated versus linking to a specific brochure, which maybe nobody will have touched. Or you want to, for example, we link to the LSC webpage where you can figure out the provider in your area rather than giving a flyer with the providers throughout South Florida or throughout Florida. Again, because the updating is done on that website already. So the concept for our application was a step-by-step guided application. We didn't want to basically rebuild the whole format of a PDF. When you go into Legal Server, the online intake module, there is a sort of pre-built application that looks very much like what a PDF of a full application would look like, meaning it's basically the 2 pages of the pre-screen, the client's just storing the information in themselves. That would be great if clients we were going to accept every single person that applied. But because the reality is people are going to apply from different places or with different legal issues, we needed to build something more like that was step-by-step and guided people through what their eligibility was for our services. Configure it to screen out the clearly ineligible. I find that that is one of the most important things that the application does. The vast majority of the applications that have been completed for our online intake have been people who had issues we could not assist with. And that means those people didn't contact us, they didn't come into our office, they didn't call us because they got the referral that they needed through our online intake application. Build it so as not to reject unnecessarily. The best example I can give you of this is assets is something that we as an LSC program can make somebody ineligible for. However, no matter how we worded the assets question, no matter how much we tried to simplify it, in testing, people could not answer that question appropriately. And if they put in assets that weren't truly assets, they would be found ineligible. So we just eliminated the assets question because what we were finding is it was going to unnecessarily reject clients who might have otherwise been eligible if they just had answered the question correctly. So you don't want to build an application that's going to be so cumbersome people are going to get rejected because they're not going to understand it. And always try to provide an alternative source of assistance. So if they don't qualify for your services, give them some place that they can go, someone that they can contact, some self-help material that they can use. Because there are so many resources out there that you don't want to build this application that just becomes a dead end for people. So we have some critical decision points in our application. The first area that someone can get screened out, as I mentioned, is county. County, for us right now, is just Miami-Dade and Monroe County. So if someone just picks a different county from those, they're going to get directed to the LSC website where they can pick a provider in their area. The next one is legal problem area. So for example, if someone picks Miami-Dade County and family law, we don't handle family law cases. So again, they will get a link to other providers in our region who do handle family law cases. If they qualify, if they make it through, they pick Miami-Dade and they pick public benefits as their problem area. Then they get to go to the next step. The next major decision point is immigration and income. So if they are an ineligible immigrant, they're going to get information that they need to find another provider. And again, if they're over income, but we're not counting assets at that point because we don't want to screen people out unnecessarily. And in all of these places, if for whatever reason the client believes, the applicant believes, that they got this message in error, it identifies that they should contact our office and what hours they should do that. So people always feel that there's a resource for them to reach out to if they really do think they're eligible. And then the final place that people kind of get screened out is legal problem detail. So the person who identified public benefits as the problem in that first decision point will now again get asked more information about their problem. So they can, for example, get asked public benefits. Which public benefit do you have an issue with? And let's say they pick food stamps. Then they're going to get asked, have you applied? If you applied, have you been denied? If you've been denied, was the denial within the last 90 days? If yes, that case gets through. So basically, if they identify that they haven't applied or that they were denied, but that was 2 years ago, then they're going to get information that they need to go apply for the services, they need to apply for the food stamps, and they can return if they're denied. But basically, at that point, most people will make it through because they do actually have a legal problem. Once the application is submitted, the person will get a confirmation page that will let them know that. So the way that the process works is the applicant completes the intake application and receives a confirmation that they submitted that application once it's completed. Then the completed application is sent to the Florida online intake portal where the person completed it. To the user, this is seamless. They don't see this. To our version, our instance of Legal Server. In our instance of Legal Server, it will be placed in a holding pen. We will see only very bare bones information about this intake pending a conflict check. Then the case is assigned to an intake staff member who will perform the conflict check and will release the case and say, yes, this case is okay, there's no conflict, and release it into Legal Server if there's no conflict. If there were a conflict, then at that point we would reject the case and we would notify the person that we can't take their case due to a conflict. Assuming that no conflict exists, the intake paralegal contacts the client to verify the information in the application. Whereas a normal screening interview could take 30 minutes, depending on the issue, a confirmation phone call can take 5 minutes, confirming name, address, phone number, income, obtaining the asset information, and confirming that the client is in fact eligible, and then sending the link to the attorney on duty. And then the attorney on duty will call the person back for a substantive interview. So the timeline. Basically, it takes about 3 to 6 months of planning, depending on how much of a chunk of your services you're taking on or how in-depth you want the application to go. We ask a few questions once we get to the specific legal problem code, but we don't ask clients to provide a whole open-ended ton of information about their legal issue. We find that it's more helpful to get that once we speak to them. So the more robust you want your application to be, the longer that planning process may be. The actual development of the application for us took somewhere between 12 and 18 months, but we did develop it in 3 languages, so obviously we built it in English and then had to have it translated to Spanish and Creole and then testing in those languages as well. And so the testing, we were testing throughout, and then once we were finished, we tested again. And I would recommend between the testing as you're working on it and then testing at the end, 3 months of testing. Once you're done testing, you implement it, and then you continue refining. And part of the way we refine the application is that there is a survey at the end of each application, which the person can complete and give us, excuse me, give us input on what the form was like, how easy was it to use, and if they had any complaints. So based on those, you can determine if there's any changes you need to make to your application. And this will probably be more involved in the first 3 months, but it's something that you'll have to do ongoing as you get input, because we will continue to receive surveys at the end of the application from people. So our application just looks like a big Get Help button at the top of our website, and people just click the Get Help button, and to them it doesn't look like they're going anywhere different, but they are then routed to the, if you look at the URL there, the FLOI-legalserver.org online intake module. The person can, in this page, pick the language, and they can also kind of see that they're going to be, there's going to be a before you apply, a start page, and then some screening information. Once the person completes the application, Every day we can go into Legal Server, click on Cases, Electronic Case Transfers, and filter for the applications that came in from the previous day. And as you can see, this is just test cases that I created. And then if you click on that blue hyperlink with the case identification number, you will be able to see the information that we've received from that user and then assign it to an intake staff member or screener. This is what it looks like once you click that blue hyperlink. And right here you can see the conflict search is right next to the name. You do the conflict search, and from there you can determine if you can release this information into your intake or not, into your legal server or not. If you notice there's a continue button at the bottom, if everything is fine, you would continue and the application is released. Or you can click a different action at the bottom, like reject if the applicant is in fact a conflict or can't be accepted for another reason. And the way that it'll look once you've accepted that case is that it'll say the intake type will be online intake. I didn't fully complete this intake. I just did the name. I didn't put the address. But all of that would already be populated, so you would be able to see the street address, the zip code, all the information the person filled in would already be populated, and you would only need to answer questions that you didn't ask as part of your online intake application. So, for example, the person selected English, and that's how they completed this application, so the language is automatically English. Oh, I meant to just say one more thing about this. We have all sorts of specialized fields, like is the caller a victim of domestic violence? We ask if they're a veteran. We ask if they're special grants. Some of those are questions that we ask in the application to screen the person out. So, for example, if they're a Ryan White applicant, we don't let them use the online intake application because we need their Ryan White referral, and we offer them all sorts of special services. So at that point, they'll be routed to contact our office. But if they have some other issue, like they are a victim of domestic violence or previously incarcerated or any of those things, we might collect that data, but that is something that our intake paralegal will collect when they do the confirmation call. We don't include it in our online intake application to keep it slightly more streamlined. So that is sort of the basics of what we built. I'd like to take a minute now to just show you what the application looks like as you are actually going through it. But I'm happy to take questions if anybody has any now before we do that. Okay, I don't know if anybody can speak, but I'm going to go ahead and give you another minute. I don't see any questions in the chat or anything. Okay, so when you go to our website, legalservicesmiami.org, and I welcome any of you who want to do this to go ahead and do it. You can go to this website. The only thing I ask is if you're going to try and create an application, just use the name test so that I know it's clearly a fake and we can screen out for it. So you click on the Get Help tab, and this takes you to the online intake application and LOI. You can pick language, and here it has the instructions in all 3 languages so that people know what we're asking them. We're going to go ahead and do it in English. Some of you, if you'd seen the previous Legal Server module, it looked like a roadmap, but it actually, from what I've been told from the PSTI folks, is that it actually doesn't display as well on phones. So this is a cleaner version that actually does display well on phones, so that's why we went with that option. We found that this was helpful for people to have sort of information that we would be asking them right at the beginning, so that if they know they don't have this information, they may want to come back and complete this at a different time. This is the disclaimer page. So we're basically explaining the areas that we serve, that they should not use this application if they have any sort of emergency or anything that requires a short deadline. Now, our turnaround time is typically to contact people within 1 to 2 business days. I don't think we've gone to 2 business days yet, but we had actually kind of a low number of applications. But you still don't want someone, I mean, since people can complete this application at any time, you wouldn't want somebody completing this application the Thursday of Thanksgiving thinking they're going to get an answer that following Friday when we were clearly closed for the holiday. But if they agree to this disclaimer, they click yes, and then they can also continue at that point. So these are some of the questions that we asked because these are some of the things that are going to be ineligible for our services or who might be asked to come in to the office. So are you in prison? Do you have a court date within the next 2 weeks? And this is just in case they missed some of these questions. At the first page it said, so some of these issues on the first page where it said, we can't help you if these are the cases, or you should contact us if you have a deadline within the next 10 days or if you have an eviction that requires an immediate response. But assuming that none of these are the situation, then we can get to the point where they're going to pick county. So just to make the list simpler, we just basically picked other state places in Florida or out of state, or the counties that we serve. We picked Broward. We left Broward on here because we do get a fair number of people from Broward, and we route them directly to Broward, legal aid or the service providers in Broward. So we asked them to choose a problem category, and we basically give a definition of each category so that it makes it a little easier for people. But if they pick Miami-Dade County and they pick government benefits, they're going to be told you have a problem that it looks like we can help with. And at that point, they can continue on to the application. If they're a veteran or have a Ryan White case manager, they would again be routed to come into the office because we provide them with a call or come in because we provide them with additional services. Citizenship status. If they pick, I am not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, they will be advised to contact us because, as the LSC programs know, there are other categories that we may be able to help, but they're very specialized, and we want to get that information from the person directly. So at that point, they can fill out the application. It will automatically fill in the city. We ask for a phone number that we can reach them. As you can see, I fill this application out with fake information quite frequently. We only collect the last 4 digits of the social, just like we do in office, and then the date of birth. If they miss anything with an asterisk, they'll be routed back to this page. If they pick, and I'm just going to, I hope this doesn't. So, like I said, if we pick something that makes them ineligible, they're going to be said that they need to contact our office to find out if we can help them. Or they can click the list of providers here if they think that's more appropriate. But let's assume that they are eligible. So again, how many people are in the household? Current living situation, let's say they rent. This is probably the most complicated page, which is the financial information. We try to explain what they should include as income, a calculator if they want to calculate if they're paid by the hour, they have to pick the source of income, and their expenses. This most people are able to figure out. We found that assets was something they could not really easily get through, so we left this in. But assuming that they are employed and they make $250 a week, and they pay rent. And so they can use this, which would be fairly useless, or they can just type in how much they pay in rent. They can also choose no expenses, and it defaults to 0. And they can choose the same thing for income, no income, and it defaults to 0. So it does a lot of the same things that Legal Server would do for you, and it calculates here at the bottom the expenses for them and the sitting as well. So this is the page that we're having the most, we're still kind of trying to refine because we're trying to build branch logic now that will only show you problems here that relate to the legal problem description that you described in the second page, and it hasn't quite worked yet because ideally what we'd like to have happen is if you picked government benefits, only the government benefits problems will show up. But we haven't got that to work perfectly yet. Oh, food stamps, have you applied for food stamps? No. Yes, I applied. Have you received a decision regarding the application? And the only reason these are pre-filled is because this is the exact application I used the other day for testing. So typically a client wouldn't have this already pre-filled. Have you received a decision? Yes. Was the application approved? No. At that point, they can continue to the next page. And it says you may qualify, and then they get a final page that lets them review all the information before they submit it. So if they realize that they got their phone number wrong, they put in the wrong address, any information is incorrect at all, they can go back and just click here to edit. And then finally, submit application. And then at that point, it will show up in our version of Legal Services, and it tells them that the application has been successfully submitted. We are still trying to work with PSTI to maybe, if the client input an email, for an email confirmation to be sent to them, but that is not something that they currently have available. So we're working on getting that to happen, because I think that will be very helpful to people to have sort of proof that they've applied and be able to keep that in their email. So are there any questions about our online intake application, our process, and anything at all? If everybody just wants just one more minute, I will go into, this is the online intake module page. This is where we actually developed the application. And if you click on the Edit the Online Intake Process, it'll actually show you what our application looks like, what each page looks like. So if you are the administrator for Legal Server in your program, this format will be very similar and familiar to you, because it's very similar to what currently happens in Legal Server. And then you can just pick the page that you want to edit. And on each page, so for example, the screening page, you click Edit, and you'll be able to see on the left-hand side here your branch logic. So if in prison, yes; if in prison, no. Each one of them has a different structure. So you can very easily edit the branch logic that is being used on this page. So it actually is very, I find, intuitive, and it's just a good system to use. And if you're using Legal Server already, it should be very familiar to you. So that's all the information that I have. I am happy to answer questions now, or if after you can go into our application, play with it. If you have suggestions, if you run into any problems, please feel free to let me know. But that would be helpful to me. But if you have questions, or if, I know that sometimes you're watching this now, but really you're not at the point where you're ready to do this, but in 6 months you are, I hope that you'll reach out. My email address is isanchezbryson@legalservicesmiami.org, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can. My information is also, I believe, on our website. All right, well, if there are no questions, thanks, everybody.